Afternoon and welcome to Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. This is your holy host, the Bishop of Santa Clarita, back for another opportunity to talk about the two things that nobody really wants to talk about, religion and politics, and yes, just like a fine wine, they do indeed mix. Today is all about Proposition 50, folks. The ballots have been dropped. I received mine on Monday. We signed them. We did the little dimple, put it in the mailbox, and so 3 votes out of our household went for no on Prop 50. Yes, Mike?
Isn't that like a hanging chad?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
That's good. It's amazing to have you back today, Mike, and
Thank you.
with your wonderful jokes. But we've ballots have been dropped, and now this is the big deal, folks. We've got just a few more weeks before the special election is upon us, and our desire is to see no on Prop 50 on November 4th. I have with us today someone that I think will be able to speak to this particular proposition in a very, very educational way, Mark Meuser. He is a constitutional and election law attorney with the Dhillon Law Group. Mark, how are you?
I am doing great, and thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely, Mark. I wish people could see you because a few weeks ago when I saw you at the Cal GOP or the LA GOP, you were sporting a rather dapper mustache, which I think you currently still are.
I am. I have not got rid of it.
You could almost be like a Western star. That mustache is that good, Mark. But anyway, had the pleasure of meeting Mark a few years ago when he ran for senator here in the state of California, and now has been a constitutional and election law attorney with the Dhillon Law Group. First of all, Mark, would you explain to our listeners what the governor is attempting to do with this whole gerrymandering scheme?
Okay, well, I stop using gerrymander. I start using Gavin-mander when it comes to Prop 50.
Okay.
So let's start with the basics, and let's pretend that somebody who's listening to us today has no idea what Prop 50 is. They haven't seen any of the campaign commercials, or maybe they have seen all the talking points, and it's like, what the hell is Prop 50 even about? And in order to do that, I need to take everybody back to 2008 and 2010. There were a pair of initiatives passed by voters in the state of California that said, you know what, we want to get rid of all this gerrymandering. We want to stop having the politicians select their voters, and we want to put that in front of an independent redistricting commission. Why is that so important? Well, politicians, when they get to select their voters by redistricting and saying, hey, I want this community here, this community here, this community here, this community here, what they are trying to do is they're trying to create safe seats. And when you have a safe seat or a non-competitive seat, what that means is that you really are not accountable to the voters, because it doesn't matter what's going to happen absent some, a once-in-a-century election. When the politicians are trying to create these safe seats so that they don't have to campaign and they don't have to be accountable to the voters, because they're going to win no matter what. And so the voters of California got fed up with the system of the politicians constantly creating non-competitive seats where the politicians pick their voters. And what they did is, instead of allowing the politicians to select their voters, the voters set up this independent commission, which has 5 Republicans on it, 5 Democrats, 4 independents, and they are to make the decision about how the lines are drawn. So thus, the voters are able to select their representatives. And more competitive districts are hopefully created. And with more competitive districts, that means more politicians are accountable to the voters. Because when a politician is not accountable to the voters, It means they are bought and paid for by special interests. And so, in a nutshell, that is the system we had. Now, Nancy Pelosi has never liked this voting commission. She was one of the first funders to stop the commission from ever existing to begin with. And ever since that day, she has been looking for ways to get rid of the commission. And she realizes that, you know, in the state of California, Trump is not the most popular individual. And so they devised a plan that said, hey, our goal is to get rid of this commission so that way we can bring in more partisan gerrymandering into the state of California. So we are going to blame Trump. Our messaging is going to be, let's blame Trump. And what they have done is they said, hey, we're going to temporarily, i.e. for the next 6 years, we're going to let the politicians redraw the line. And, you know, at the end of 6 years, we'll go back to the commission. Now, as to that temporary aspect of things, once a politician has a power, they never give it up. And here's the deal. If you are a commissioner who's just spent an entire year volunteering your time to hear public comment, to follow the law, to, you know, make sure you don't divide cities, and you go down all these steps of what you have to do as a commissioner, and all the politicians have to do is blame the most unpopular politicians, say we're doing this because of some unpopular politician, and raise $100 million, and next thing you know, all the work of the commission is thrown away. What commissioner is ever going to want to volunteer to redraw the line? It is a thankless task, and with the politicians, if Prop 50 passes, they call it temporary, but no politician is ever going to say, well, if I don't like the lines in 2 years from now, or 4 years from now, or 8 years from now, or special interest says, hey, we need to make another change, there's no stopping it. And we live in a constitutional republic. The Constitution is supposed to put limits on what politicians do. And what Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi are doing is they're basically thumbing their nose at the California Constitution in order to bring Prop 50 up onto the ballot. They had to violate California Constitution about 5 different times. And, you know, but to them, they don't care. Violating the Constitution is just a end to the means. And the means is unbridled, complete power within, you know, given to them to do what they want to do.
If you're just joining us today on Politics in the Pulpit, we're talking to Mark Meuser, who's a constitutional and election law attorney with the Dhillon Law Group. Mark, explain to our listeners a little bit about what happens the day after. Let's just say that yes on 50 passes. I don't want it to, but let's just say it does. When do those new redistricted lines go into effect?
Well, if you're talking about the day after, if this thing passes, I have a lawsuit being filed in federal court. Now, I'm actually preparing that lawsuit right now.
Okay.
Because these lines are so unconstitutional, not only in how they got drawn, but the way they were drawn. They violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And so, as such, I am preparing that lawsuit right now. I mean, literally 5 minutes before on the phone with you, I was talking with my expert witnesses in preparing this particular lawsuit. And so before I answer the question you asked, I'm going to have to kind of, just to illustrate this, Texas is often blamed for why we're redistricting. But what people don't understand is that Texas had 4 unconstitutional congressional districts. They were unconstitutional based upon a recent decision made by the Fifth Circuit. And so the Department of Justice went to Texas and said, there's 2 ways we could do this, the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is you fix it. The hard way is We sue you, we win, and then you fix it. And Texas basically said, okay, we have unconstitutional districts. We need to make those districts legal. So let's follow the law in making our unconstitutional districts legal. Now, California had legal districts. There wasn't a single lawsuit out there against our districts. And just for the way of example here, Princeton University has a department where they look at gerrymandered districts. And the state of Texas had been ranked with an F, and the state of California had been ranked with a B. So Texas, which had an F and was under threat of a lawsuit by DOJ, fixes their problem legally. California has unconstitutional or has legal districts. It has to violate the California Constitution 5 times, at least 5 times, in order to create districts that we are going to have to sue them over because they violate the United States Constitution. And oh, by the way, that same Princeton University has ranked California's Prop 50 map as the second worst gerrymandered map they have seen of any of the 50 states over the last 60 years.
Wow.
That's how bad Prop 50 went. We went from a B to the second worst all time since they've been tracked. You know, there was a couple very important Supreme Court decisions that came out in the 60s. So since that precedent, you know, all the elections, all the redistricting, it is the second worst gerrymandered map that has ever been done. And that's just how bad these maps are. They basically create, they give the power to the politicians, they give the power to special interests. So let's step back and now answer the question that you asked me. You asked me what happened the day after the election, after I filed my lawsuit. Well, those, you know, you have to certify the election. That takes about 40 days. And December 19th is the magic date because on that date, that is when people can go and pull papers in order to run for Congress. So if you're going to be on the ballot in 2026, the earliest possible date that you can pull papers and go get signatures of voters so that you can be on the ballot, that occurs on December 19th. And so what has to happen is the federal court, it's going to be a 3-judge panel, is going to have a very short window in which they are looking at the issue of, are the new maps on the face of it so unconstitutional that we are not going to allow the new maps to go into effect and just keep the old maps until we're done litigating? Or are we going to let the new maps control? And so it's going to be what we call an injunction. And the question will be before the court because they're not going to have the time to receive all the testimony and review everything. It's just on the face of things, is it so clear to the judge that there's no way that these new maps can go into effect? And are they going to issue an injunction? If the 3-judge panel of the federal court does not enter an injunction, then it will go straight to the United States Supreme Court. And the question will be to the United States Supreme Court, are they going to enter an injunction stopping the new map from going into play? If they enter that injunction, then we would retain the maps drawn by the commission. If they don't enter the injunction, then everybody is going to be running for Congress in 2026 based upon the Proposition 50 map.
So you're saying basically, Mark Meuser, that it's not as simple as just voting yes on Prop 50 on November 4th, because this thing could be litigated for weeks and weeks, and we could actually still end up with the old redistricted maps as opposed to the new ones.
Yeah, let's just put it this way. I don't have any travel plans between November 5th and December 19th.
Well, yeah, I know that you do like to travel, Mark, but you're right. You are going to be definitely staying home for a little bit. Let me just quickly switch here and pivot to the voter registrations here in California, Mark. I don't know if you've been paying attention to some of the news about this, but nearly half of voters in California, as you know, are registered with the Democratic Party. 25% or so are registered Republicans, and the rest are no party preference. But the good thing is, along with not only California but several other states, the Republican Party has made gains here in California, where just under 50,000 new voters have been placed on the voter rolls, whereas the Democrats notched about 190. Does this mean that it's very possible that there are just enough people in California with common sense that they just might vote down Prop 50?
Well, I'm going to actually add to the statistics that you're talking about. If you actually go back over the last 2 years, the Republican Party has gained over 500,000 more voters than the Democrat Party has. There is, the numbers that you were quoting of 50,000 over the last 6 months, that is not really, I mean, it's a good statistic, but it doesn't really fully illustrate the seismic change that is going on in the state of California. And, all you have to do is go back a couple years and you see that voters in California, it kind of started with COVID. It is a slow and arduous process. And, Gavin Newsom is doing this Gavin-mander with Prop 50 because he understands that if he doesn't do so, there was a realistic possibility that the Democrats are going to lose 6 seats in Congress this next election. I mean, the trend that I am seeing right now in the state is such that it is, they are concerned about losing seats in Congress, losing seats in the Assembly, losing seats in the Senate. I mean, there's a legitimate shot that they lose their supermajority this next election. Now, the question comes, is there enough? This is what I will say. I have seen a lot of polls over the last couple of weeks. This is 100% going to be a voter turnout election, which means the side that gets their people out to the polls to vote will be the side that wins. There's no other way to describe it. I see numbers with yes passing. I see with 50 passing, and I see polls that show that it fails. And they're all over the place, which really means that the voters who decide to vote will actually determine the election.
Mark Meuser, I want to thank you so much for calling into Politics in the Pulpit today. As you'd mentioned earlier, you're going to be in California for a very long time, and we'll be praying that Prop 50 it gets decimated at the polls on November 4th. But if not, Mark Meuser is going to be indispensable going forward to make sure that California gets proper representation within these districts. So, Mark Meuser, more power to you. God bless you. Thank you so much for calling in today.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. When we come back here on Politics in the Pulpit, we'll talk a little bit more about Prop 50. And then also, if you're over at the Target on Golden Valley, if you're listening here in Santa Clarita, we've got a bunch of folks trying to sign people up for the ballot measures. Make sure you drop by the Target there on Golden Valley and say hi to the folks out there. When we come back on Politics in the Pulpit, we'll talk more about Prop 150 as well as the meltdown of Katie Porter. All right, we're back here live on Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station. If you're just tuning in, we were just on the line with Mark Meuser, constitutional and election law attorney with Dhillon Law Group. explaining the ins and outs of Proposition 50. Should it pass? Should it not pass? I'm encouraging you out there to vote no on Proposition 50. Personal friend of mine and a faithful member of the Freedom's Way Church wrote an editorial for KHTS a couple of days ago encouraging folks to vote no on Prop 50. Got a lot of traction here on the Facebook page at KHTS Hometown Station. And it's written by Mark Hershey, so I encourage you to go there and give it a quick read and a like, and then maybe share it on your platform. And just get the word out, because just as Mark was saying earlier, the only way for the governor of California to make this thing viable in the Californians' eyes is to federalize this whole Proposition 50 by blaming Trump or bringing Trump's name into this. And that's because there are a lot of people in California that have Trump derangement syndrome. If you link Trump's name to anything, they're going to go the exact opposite. For instance, do you remember a couple weeks ago when Trump and RFK came out and said that there was a link between taking Tylenol and autism? And by the way, Tylenol came out with something very similar to this back in 2017, so several years before Trump and RFK came out with that. And what did a bunch of absolute lunatic leftists do? They took handfuls of Tylenol to despite Trump, and I believe some of those individuals ended up hospitalized. A couple of them ended up dying because of the overdose. Folks, that's cultic, lunatic behavior, folks. And I just think it's important for you to understand here in California, especially if you're listening in California, that we need to be represented by a balance of power. Yeah, there's going to be places in our state that are going to be predominantly Democratic. I mean, San Francisco Bay is probably going to always have a Democrat, and Los Angeles, portions of Los Angeles County are always going to be represented by Democrats. I kind of understand that. But there are large swaths of this state that are red, and they're inland. They don't touch the water. They're inland. They're desert communities. They're mountain communities. They're rolling hills communities. And these folks are what I would consider more common sense people, if you will, the lifeblood of California. One of the things that I found rather interesting about this whole Prop 50 rollout, do you remember when Obamacare came out back in 2011, 2012, and there was the big hue and cry about the internet crashing as people were trying to go on and to take part in the whole Obamacare thing. And so there was a big, complete disaster on the rollout of Obamacare. Well, there was something very similar to this here with Prop 50, where there was a botched rollout where the ballot guide mailed to over 8 million voters had the wrong district maps with District 22 represented twice.
I got that.
Yeah. And guess what?
And what did that cost, by the way?
An extra $4 million plus to get that corrected. Jeez. And then mailed back out to the same 8 million who got the botched out maps. Folks, this is a feckless state government that is drunk on power and authoritarianism, and what they want to do is to maintain a one-party status and seal the deal on that in California with these new gerrymandered, or as Mark would say, Gavin-mandered lines here in the state of California. So again, the only thing I'll say about this, and then I'll move on, is I'd encourage you to vote no on Prop 50. I want to quickly pivot to an event that's happening on October 19th. If you want to connect with some conservative organizations and folks who are running for office, if you want to get connected, if you want to get involved, if you want to get going at a grassroots level, folks, then I'd encourage you to come out on October 19th. It's called Patriots in the Park. The location is to be announced, but I promise you it'll probably be in a park, as the title suggests. And again, it's October 19th from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 4 p.m. And again, the location is to be announced. I encourage you also to look for it on Facebook, Patriots in the Park, October 19th, 2 to 4 p.m. Well, we've also got a race for governor here in the state of California. And it's going to start getting more interesting after the special election because everything is really focused on Prop 50, no on Prop 50, yes on Prop 50. But we've got several Democrats, and the majority of them, if not all of them, are all lunatics. We don't want any of them representing us. But there's one in particular that is an absolute, she just is nuts, folks. And if you have ever seen, just looking at Katie Porter is enough for sane people to say, I cannot have that person representing me in the state of California.
I can't eat mashed potatoes anymore.
Yeah. This is a woman that has been, by her own, her own people, the people that have been around her, that know her the best, say that she doesn't have the temperament to be California's next governor. But yet, somehow, some way, maybe through name recognition, she is the leading candidate for the Democrats in all of the polls at the moment. And even the ones where Republican-leaning pollsters have come out with polls, she still leads by 1 or 2 against either a Steve Hilton or a Sheriff Chad Bianco. I don't get it. This is a woman who, according to her ex-husband, in front of their children, got angry and took a pot of scalding potatoes that were on the stove and poured it over her husband's head in front of her kids. Folks, this is a unhinged individual. There was an individual that was working in Katie Porter's office in Orange County who had COVID, and I guess she didn't say anything about it. So then Katie Porter ended up getting COVID, and when news got back, it was this certain person who didn't say that she had COVID. Katie had her fired. This person is vindictive. I would say that she doesn't have the temperament. She's just an ugly individual, folks. So what does Katie Porter do? Well, Katie Porter goes to CBS News, and she does an interview. We're going to play all 3 minutes. I might have Mike stop from here to there on a few key points. But I want you to listen to this 3 minutes because it starts off okay, and then you can kind of tell she's getting a little irritated, and then finally she snaps. Mike, play it.
What do you say to the 40% of California voters who you'll need in order to win who voted for Trump?
How would I need them in order to win, man?
Well, unless you think you're going to get 60% of the vote. You think you'll get 60%. Everybody who did not vote for Trump will vote for you. That's what you're saying.
In a general election, yes. If it is me versus a Republican, I think that I will win the people who did not vote for Trump.
What if it's you versus another Democrat?
I don't intend that to be the case.
So how do you not intend that to be the case? Are you going to ask them not to run?
No, I'm saying I'm going to build the support. I have the support already in terms of name recognition. And so I'm going to do the very best I can to make sure that we get through this primary in a really strong position. But let me be clear with you. I represented Orange County. I represented a purple area. I have stood on my own 2 feet and won Republican votes before. That's not something every candidate in this race can say. If you're from a deep blue area, if you're from LA or you're from Oakland, you don't have an experience.
But you just said you don't need those Trump voters.
Well, you asked me if I needed them to win.
So you don't
I
think
feel like this is unnecessarily argumentative. What is your question?
The question is the same thing I asked everybody, that this is being called the empowering voters to stop Trump's power grab. Every other candidate has answered this question. This is not
Correct. And I said I support it.
So, and the question is, what do you say to the 40% of voters who voted for Trump?
Oh, I'm happy to say that. It's the do you need them to win part that I don't understand. I'm happy to answer the question as you have it written, and I'll answer it.
And we've also asked the other candidates, do you think you need any of those 40% of California voters to win? And you're saying, no, you don't.
No, I'm saying I'm going to try to win every vote I can. And what I'm saying to you is that...
Well, to those voters, okay, so you...
I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to call it. Okay. Thank you.
You're not going to do the interview with us?
Nope, not like this. I'm not. Not with 7 follow-ups to every single question you ask.
Every other candidate has answered our follow-ups.
I don't care. I want to have a pleasant, positive conversation in which you ask me about every issue on this list. And if every question you're going to make up a follow-up question, then we're never going to get there.
Ms.
And
Porter,
we're just going to circle around.
I am an investigative
I have never had to do
reporter.
this before, ever.
You've never had to have a
end an
conversation
interview.
with
To end
a
an
reporter?
interview.
Okay, but every other candidate has done this.
What part of I'm me? I'm running for governor because I'm a leader. So I am going to make.
So you're not going to answer questions from reporters? Okay, why don't we go through? I will continue to ask follow-up questions because that's my job as a journalist, but I will go through and ask these, and if you don't want to answer, you don't want to answer. So nearly every legislative...
I don't want to have an unhappy experience with you, and I don't want this all on camera.
I don't want to have an unhappy experience with you either. I would love to continue to ask these questions so that we can show our viewers what every candidate feels about every one of these issues that they care about. And redistricting is a massive issue. We're going to do an entire story just on the responses to that question. And I've asked everybody the same follow-up questions.
Mike, you've been out for a few weeks because of an injury, and it's
Yeah.
good to have you back in
Thank
today.
you.
Why don't you bring that mic a little closer to you there, Mike? Let me ask you a question. Listening to that 3 minutes or so of Katie Porter being interviewed by what you would consider mainstream media, CBS News, does she sound like she could be our next governor?
She sounds scared, and again, these are standard questions.
Not only that,
Softball questions.
why does she have to remind herself, as well as the interviewee, I'm running for governor because I'm a leader?
Wow.
Why is she saying that? She can't even take a few follow-up questions from a CBS reporter and has an absolute mental breakdown.
Those were easy questions too, and she refused to.
Mike, you could have asked the questions
Yeah.
and if anybody's watching on Facebook Live or YouTube, Mike is wearing his Jimmy Buffett Hawaiian shirt here, looking good.
Thank you.
And your hair is nice and combed.
Thanks.
And so you could have asked these questions and still gotten the same reaction from Katie Porter.
She's definitely on defend.
I just
think.
don't understand what her thinking was and what her campaign was thinking about allowing her to just go off the rails like that. Listen, Porterhouse Porter, that'll be our nickname for her now. Porterhouse Porter is just an ugly individual, folks. There is no way in the world that you could put a gun to my head, figuratively speaking, of course, with all the wonderful political violence that's going around the country. You're not going to get me to vote for that woman. I will vote for excrement on a shoe, then vote for Katie Porter. Folks, please make a good choice November of 2026.
It's a no-brainer.
Vote Republican.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. We have been a democratically controlled state for over 15 years. We have the highest gas prices, the highest taxes. I just got an 11% increase in my Southern California Edison bill in the mail the other day. They're going to be doing this every year. Folks,
Yep.
we have lunatics running our state, and you need to get off of your duff, and you need to do something about it. You need to join some grassroots groups. You need to be a part of this. Patriots in the Park. If you're over on Golden Valley at the Target, go see the folks that are holding up the signs there and sign the petitions and get going, folks. If the ballot's in mail, if your ballots have come and it's sitting on your table, please fill it out. Put it in the mailbox. There's no stamp required. Sign your name, put your address down, and move on, folks. When we come back on Politics in the Pulpit, I want to talk about what comes out of the mouth of a man is genuinely what is in the heart of that man. What do I mean by that? I want to talk about some disturbing text messages from a guy in Virginia that's running for Attorney General named Jay Jones. And I want to expose to you that what's in a man's heart will come out of his mouth when we return here on your hometown station. All right, we're back here for our final segment of Politics and the Pulpit. And I want to talk a little bit about the human heart. The human heart is, according to the Word of God, book of Jeremiah, Old Testament prophet said the heart is deceitful, desperately wicked. Who can know it? And of course, we know that God can know it, but usually, if you're trying to hide something in the inner recesses of your heart, at some point, the real you is going to come out. And it's going to come out either verbally out of your own cake hole, or you're going to text it, which is essentially still the fruit of your heart. And I'm talking about Democratic Virginia Attorney General nominee Jay Jones. He has faced sharp backlash after saying he wanted a Republican murdered and wished death on the Republicans' children. Now, before I get into exactly what he said, I want to read this verse to you from Luke chapter 6, verse 45, which I think is very illustrative of this story. Here is what Dr. Luke says. He says, quote, "A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil." And then here's the rejoinder. "For of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh." And all that verse is basically saying is if you've got a generally good heart, then good things are going to proceed out of your mouth. And if you have a very acidic, evil, an adulterous heart, then those things are going to come bubbling out at some point as well. No matter how well you try to put lipstick on that pig, it is definitely going to come out. So here's this Democratic Virginia Attorney General nominee, Jay Jones, who has put out several texts from a couple of years ago. And he goes on to say in the text, he says, "Everyone has already noted," Jones told Republican delegate Kerry Coyner, "3 people," I'm quoting from the text now, "3 people, 2 bullets. Gilbert," who's the Republican guy, "Hitler, and Pulpit. Then," he added, "Gilbert gets 2 bullets to the head." Wow. In other words, Jay Jones puts Gilbert, the Republican contender at the time, in the crew with the 2 worst people you know, and he ends up receiving both the bullets every time. Not Pulpit, not Hitler, but the Republican contender. Here's a article that goes on to say that Jones also wants the Republican murdered. Not only did he want the Republican murdered, he even wishes his children to die in their mother's arms because that Republican spoke kindly about a colleague and went on to say that if those guys die before me, I will go to their funerals to piss on their graves. Folks, out of the mouth, the abundance of the heart speaketh. This guy does not deserve to be anywhere close to the office that enforces and implements law. And I know that there's another more high-profile race in Virginia. That's Spamberger, the Democrat, and Winsome Sears, who's the lieutenant governor under the current governor there, who's very popular in Virginia. It seems as if Winsome is trying to kind of get some wind back into her sails here going into the November 4th election. But the fact of the matter is, Jay Jones should step down. Can I say something to you? Not one Democrat has called for Jay Jones to step down. Can you imagine had these texts been from a Republican running for Attorney General or for that matter any office? I mean, the cumulative calls for that individual to step down, and rightfully so, would be epic. You'd have the coordination of the mainstream media. You'd have senators and congressmen and all kinds of organizations coming out and forcing the hand of this individual to step down, but we're not hearing any of that. Why is it that when political violence like that is articulated on the left, it's kind of shrugged off? But when it's articulated by those on the right, which is not very often, by the way, but it does happen, because a deceitful heart can be on both political sides of the aisle. But it doesn't happen very much on the right as much, but it happens an awful lot on the left. It just gets shrugged off. But if it happens on the right, the world is falling apart. It's Chicken Little. This guy's got to step down. The world is coming to an end. Folks, you have got to see this for what it is. This guy is nuts. Jay Jones in Virginia needs to step down. And then the last thing I want to mention, news broke today that the arson suspect that was blamed for starting a fire that ended up causing the fire that burned through the Pacific Palisades was arrested today. Yeah. U.S. Attorney General for California Central District Bill Asaley announced the arrest of Jonathan Rinderknecht. That's an interesting last name. He was arrested in the state of Florida. And if you remember back in January, I don't know how you can forget it, but that Palisades fire destroyed hundreds and hundreds of buildings and homes, killed 12 people, and amassed over $150 billion in damages. Folks, some of those folks still haven't even got to go back to see their property. It's pathetic. So that suspect arrested today, Jonathan Rinderknecht. And then James Comey actually got indicted today on 2 counts, one for false statements and the other for obstruction of a congressional proceeding. Comey's plea, of course, was not guilty. I expected that. I don't know what to expect of this. I really hope that something does happen. But you know what? I'm not going to hold my breath because the deep state does indeed run deep. Next week here on Politics in the Pulpit, we are going to have Alex Villanueva calling in to the show, and he's going to be talking about his run to replace Robert Luna. And so catch you this time next week at 2 o'clock as we talk to Alex Villanueva. Thanks for tuning in to Politics in the Pulpit today on your hometown station. We'll catch you the same time next week, 2 o'clock, here on your hometown station.